Hey everybody, Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Optronics Opti-Brite LED work lights on our 2013 Ford F-250. Now, having a set of work lights on your truck can come in handy in a lot of different situations. Maybe we need to get to the job site, it's at night, and we don't really want to carry a generator around to have some work lights that plug into 110. Well, these work lights mounted to your truck are going to work with 12 or 24 volt systems and make it a lot easier so you can get light almost in any direction. We chose to mount ours here at the back of the bumper so we could have light coming at the back. The truck already has some work lights on the front. That way we can have light all the way around our truck, so whether we need to back up to a trailer, unhook the trailer, unload it, or anything in the back of the truck, we'll have light. But then again, on the front, if we need to have light up there, we have light there as well. Even in a fully lit room like we're in right now that has a lot of light in it, you can see how much light that light is putting on the door there. So you can only imagine how bright it is when there's not a lot of ambient light and the lights are turned off. Now that we have the lights off, you can really see how bright these lights are. Now, obviously we have a door right behind us, but you can see just how much output it's really putting out and how bright it is on the door, and it's going to extend well past that. So here's what the light looks like once we got it installed. It is going to have 6 LEDs in there, and the housing itself is going to be about 6 inches by 2 inches. Now, I really like these because they have a flood design to them. It's going to have a flood pattern rather than such a tight beam, so it will disperse the light out pretty well and give you a really good viewing area. The housing on our light is going to be made out of an aluminum, and it's a black powder coat finish, so it'll look really nice, and the fact that it's aluminum means it's not going to rust at all. You can see on the back here we have those really large fins. That's going to help dissipate the heat from the LEDs. That way we can make sure that they're going to be working a really long time. Now, on the front of our light, it's going to have a shatterproof polycarbonate lens, which is really nice because, especially since they're on the back bottom of our truck, obviously things are going to be kicked up and we're not going to have to worry about rocks or any other debris hitting the lens and breaking it. And even though our lights are at the back here and they will see a lot of abuse because of the environment, dust, debris, and everything else coming up to the back of the bumper here, we're not going to have to worry about the lights too much, especially when it comes to water. A lot of people might be worried about going through the car wash or spraying down their bumper because of lights here. But our lights are going to be IP69K rated, which means they are rated for extremely high pressure and temperature of water, but it's not recommended to completely submerge them. Another thing a lot of people don't really think about is a lot of new trucks come with backup cameras. That's an awesome feature. It definitely gives us a lot of safety and peace of mind knowing what's behind us. But if it's dark, our reverse lights really don't put out that much light, so sometimes it's really hard to see what's going on in the rear view camera. But with our lights, it's going to create a very bright area behind us so we can make sure we know what's behind us while we're backing up. Now, our lights are going to use a pedestal mount, which basically is just going to have a bolt going through and 2 little tabs where our light will mount in between. Now, these can really be mounted just about anywhere you can fit the mount and you have room for the light. We chose to mount ours on the bottom of the bumper beam here, so that way we can angle our light to get that perfect view and lighten up what we need to. Now, as far as the wiring goes for our lights, it's an extremely easy process because it's only a 2-wire system. We're just going to have a power and a ground wire. So we can simply just ground our light to a solid piece of metal, preferably the frame, and then we just need to get a 12-volt power source. In our application, we had outrigger switches in the cab, so we went ahead and wired those up there. But if your truck doesn't have those switches, you will need to pick up a switch so you can run your lights. But now that we've seen what our lights look like and gone over some of the common uses of them, let's go ahead and show you how we wired them and installed them in our F-250. To start our installation, you want to figure out where you're going to be mounting your lights. Now, we're using ours as work lights on the back of our truck here. We already have one mounted, so we're going to go ahead and mount the other one on the driver's side. Now, the brackets that come with it, there's a few different ways that you can mount this. Essentially, it's just going to be a mount that our light is going to slide into that we can secure it. Now, I went ahead and used the included carriage bolt. I just drilled a hole right next to this large hole here so I could reach in and put the nut on there. But obviously, once it gets to a certain point, you're not going to be able to get a wrench in there, so I just used the bracket itself to tighten it up. But you could use a self-tapping screw. probably be a little bit easier, but you just want to make sure that this bracket is nice and secure. Then we'll take our light, and we'll grab the long hex bolt out of our kit. And it's going to come with a few lock washers, so we'll go ahead and slip that over, slide our light into the bracket. You just want to pass the bolt so it goes all the way through. And then for the time being, I just kind of like to pivot it out of the way and apply the nut on the other side, just hand tight so the light won't fall off. And then we can always snug it up and adjust the angle to what we want it to be. And then I'm just going to take a 1/2" wrench and socket. I'm just going to snug them up. We don't really need to crank down on these, but you do want it to be tight enough so it will hold the angle that you want to point your light at. Now in each one of our lights, we're going to have a large black cable coming out of the back, and then it's going to split off into 2 wires. We'll have a white wire and a black wire. Now these are LED lights and they do need to be hooked in correctly. The white wire is your ground and the black wire is your positive or the power source wire. So we want to make sure that we get a ring terminal and we're going to ground this white wire to the frame. Now the easiest spot I think is there's a bar right here just where we mounted the light to, and we can actually just attach a ring terminal right on the inside so it's a nice flat surface, but it'll be out of the way of anything and it won't catch when we're driving down the road. So I'm going to take a ring terminal here. I'm going to crimp it on since the wires are already pre-stripped. Just keep in mind any of these little butt connectors, ring terminals, and length of wire are not going to come with your lights, but they are going to be necessary because you got to hook them in and you got to run power to the lights, so we are going to need wire, ring terminals, and a few miscellaneous things, and you can find all of that stuff here at etrailer.com. We'll crimp that ring terminal down, and then I'm going to get a self-tapping screw so I can secure my ring terminal to the frame. Whenever you do put your ground in place, you want to make sure that it's nice and tight and that ring terminal is not spinning, but you don't want to strip out the self-tapping screw. So I went ahead and grounded this light as well. So now we have 1 wire coming off of each light, which is our power wire. So the way I'm going to hook these up is our F-250 already has the factory outrigger switches on them, and the customer really wants to use that for these lights. So I'm going to take a butt connector and extend this wire over to the other light, and then we're going to route it along the frame up to the front, close to the firewall. Whenever you're routing your wires, you do just want to stay away from any heat sources, any moving parts, or anything that may potentially damage it. So we'll go ahead and show you how we routed everything and how we're going to hook everything up. Now I always suggest using heat shrink butt connectors if it is on the outside of the vehicle, because it'll give it a little bit better protection and we don't have to worry so much about corrosion. I'm going to use a heat gun to shrink down these butt connectors. If you're going to use an open flame, like a torch or a lighter, you just want to be extremely careful not to burn or char the connector or the wires. So I started by using that butt connector to extend my power wire. We ran that along the back of the bumper and the frame here. And once we got to our other light, we actually used another butt connector to connect the 2 wires together. So we have 1 single power source, and then I took a long piece of wire, running it along the frame. I started running it along the frame here using zip ties, secure it to all this other wiring that's inside the frame rail, and I started working my way towards the front. Now once I got to about the fuel tank, I did drop it down, and I started running it through all these supports here, just so it would be protected by this cover. And once we got to about the end of the fuel tank, I actually ran my wire underneath this cover and behind these supports. That way it just helped protect the wire, keep it off the ground, and I don't have to worry about anything catching on it. I started running it along, all the way down underneath this cover until we got to the very end, and then I continued along on the inside of the frame. Again, we're just using some zip ties against all those existing wires until we got to about the emergency brake pedal, and then I dropped my wire to the outside of the frame because because if we look up right here, we have a nice rubber plug that'll lead right into the cab of our truck. So we'll go ahead and move up top and figure out exactly where that plug is so we can get access for our wire inside. So we know that our grommet's going to be on the driver's side pretty close to the front. So we'll go ahead and open up the door. I'm going to remove this threshold panel so we can get underneath the carpet and find that grommet. So you just grab underneath this panel, just start working your way down. Just going to have some clips holding it in place. We'll go ahead and put that panel aside where it's not going to get damaged. Then if we come up to this panel right here towards the front, this one we can just kind of lift up a little bit and kind of pivot it out of the way, just so we can get the carpet to pull up. And now that'll give us access directly to that grommet right here. You should be able to just grab it with your fingers or maybe get a flat blade screwdriver and pop it out. But that, I can see the floor through there, so I know my wire will have access to come up and we can make our connections. Getting your wire up through is just as easy as reaching down underneath and feeding the slack up. Now you do want to make sure you pull all that slack through so that it's not having a big wad or hanging down below your truck. But what I also did is I just took a screwdriver and just poked a hole through this grommet right in the middle. That way I can take my wire and I should be able to pass my wire through the grommet. That way I can put the grommet back in place and not have to worry about any kind of leaks or any kind of fumes getting inside my truck. Just make sure we have all the slack up top. The wire's inside the grommet. Just push it back in place just like that. Our F-250 has the outrigger switches already installed. As you can see, the switches are getting power and they're already hooked into a relay and circuit protected, which makes our job really easy hooking those lights in. Now the problem is that where do we get connection and power for these switches to hook up our lights? Well, we're going to be hooking it into auxiliary 2 switch, but we're going to show you the location of where these wires are for these switches and how to test which switch you're going to be using. Now the power wire for those switches is going to be underneath the driver's side of the dash to the left-hand side of the steering wheel, but it is going to be kind of high up on the dash. It's going to be a little bit difficult to see if you're looking from the bottom, but if you take this panel off right here, it just pops right off. There's no screws, just clips. If you pull that panel off and you look in this pocket, I can reach my hand underneath so you can still see, and you're going to be looking for just blunt cut wires. There's only going to be about 4 of them, and our application is actually being used. You can see that yellow and red wire. That one's being used on switch 1. But again, should have some blunt cut wires. The one we're going to be using is the green wire with the brown tracer. Because you look in your owner's manual, that's going to be for switch 2. But just to make sure, I'm going to hook up my circuit tester, probe the wire, and turn the switch on. Make sure I'm getting power there. So here I got my circuit tester hooked up. And if I turn on the auxiliary switch number 2, you can hear my tester is registering that I'm getting power. If I turn it off, I'm not getting any power. So I know that the green wire with the brown stripe on it is for switch number 2, and that's the one we're going to be using. So at this point, we'll go ahead and hook up our wire that we ran from the back to that wire that we tested and we know is hooked up to that switch. Now, I will let you know it's probably going to be easier for you if you attach your buck connector to the wire first. Then you can make your connection inside, because as you can see, that's a very tight spot. And once I start making all my connections, you're not really going to see because my hands are going to be in the way. So, but it's just a simple buck connector, just like the ones in the back. We just need to hook our one wire that we ran up front to whichever switch wire we want to use. And since this is under the dash inside the truck, it's not necessary that you use heat shrink butt connectors, but I always like using them because they're the closest thing to give you the protection without actually soldering and using heat shrink. All right, now that we have everything wired in, I always suggest testing your lights before you put any panels back, before you start tying up your wires and tidying everything. Because if one of the lights or both of the lights are not working, it's a lot easier to fix the problem before you put all your components back in place and make everything look nice. So before I tie everything up and put all that stuff back, I'm going to have an extra set of hands turn on the lights for me and make sure they are working properly. Well, obviously we can see the lights are working, so I'm going to go ahead and take some time, clean up my wires back here under the dash, and put all those panels back in place. But now that we know that our light's working, that'll finish up your installation and your look at the Optronics Opti-Brite LED work light on our 2013 Ford F-250.